challenges right now, not difficulties. We're just setting up. And I just wanted to, on behalf of the Latin American Relief Fund, thank Bill and Heidi LeVasseur of the Mass Museum, because they have generously agreed to donate the proceeds from today's webinar to the Latin American Relief Fund. I'm a board member of this organization. It's a nonprofit based out of Oregon, but the mission of the Latin American Relief Fund is to support humanitarian organizations that assist migrants in Mexico. Specifically, we have been supporting the Albergue Ava migrant shelter in nearby Celaya, and through the generous support of our donors, we were able to raise enough money to buy the building that houses the shelter, and expenses continue. So we are very, very grateful for Bill's generosity in donating today his proceeds. So anything that you donate for the registration fee, the suggested donation for today's webinar, will go to the Latin American Relief Fund. So thank you so much, Bill. With that, hi, Ginger, are we ready to move on? Are you want to unmute yourself and introduce everybody? This is a really cool, different webinar we have. It's multimedia because Ginger and Bill have worked really hard to create a mini documentary in the Mass Museum. And so we're going to show the documentary, and then Bill will be will be answering questions throughout. Or did we decide he's going to answer questions during? Or just
yeah, so Bill is going to be answering the questions at the end. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Or at the end, if you would like to ask a live question, we're happy to put you on to ask live questions if you'd like to, or you can type them into the chat. So either way is fine. So let us know.
Or in the Q&A section. There's two. Should we limit? Prefer questions in the Q&A? Might be easier to keep track of them.
Yeah, if you'd like to say your question live, just say, just let us know, and we'll put you on camera. The reason that we did this format this time was there was a lot of feedback from the previous webinar that people wanted Bill to focus on a smaller selection of mass, but go into more depth about the meaning and history of those mass. And so we've paired those mass up with short video clips of each dance, so that it's a little bit, we know that the last webinar was a lot of information, and this is still a lot of information, but hopefully in a more edible format. And, and that Bill is also here to answer questions. Bill and Heidi have amassed an amazing mass collection here in San Miguel de Allende. So those of you that don't know, we are here live from San Miguel de Allende from their many years in Mexico. They used to live in Mexico City and spent a lot of time traveling around and collecting the mass, recording the dances. And Bill has a fascination with the mass that is definitely, we're going to bring him over to the Mac Hospital soon. And we hope that you'll enjoy this look into these mass ceremonies of Mexico and this fascinating cultural history that most people don't get to see. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Bill.
Thanks, Ginger, and welcome to the Mass Museum. The name of the museum is Another Face of Mexico, Otra Cara de Mexico, and it's my private collection of Mexican ceremonial masks. I've been traveling around Mexico for the past almost 30 years, visiting indigenous villages, observing the ceremonies, doing my research, and often acquiring masks for the collection. So in the museum, there's about 600 masks that you'll be seeing in a minute. And I did a webinar earlier. It's posted on Language Adventure Pros, the website. So you could see that that webinar. And my effort then was to describe in general terms the use of masks in ceremony in Mexico, pre-Columbian and post-Columbian Mexico. All the masks you'll see in the museum are post-Hispanic, not pre-Hispanic. They're the oldest mask I have is probably about 200 years old. But they're all used during fiestas, during ceremonies in indigenous parts of Mexico. Today, we're going to focus more on specific dances and specific masks and how they're used in ceremony. And we're going to do that by I'm going to walk you through the museum. You'll come with me, and we'll stop and talk about their different dances. I'll try to explain as best I can the nature of the dance, the purpose of the ceremony, and then I'll show you videos, no more than 2 or 3 minute clips of ceremonies so you can see how these masks are actually used in performances. We're going to start by showing you a 2-minute walkthrough of the museum, so you get an idea of the scope of the collection. There's about 600 masks in the collection. So let's do that, and then I'll come back and take you through the museum. You can come through the museum with me. Museum. I hope all of you can someday come visit the museum. We're gonna start by I'm gonna show you masks from Chiapas that are used during the carnival celebration. As you know, carnival is the week celebration leading up to Holy Week and Easter Sunday. And it precedes the 40 days of penitence called Lent in English or La Cuaresma in Spanish. This is a celebration that's very important in many, many parts of Mexico, the carnival celebration. So come with me and we will go in the museum. Yeah, these are the masks that I'm referring to. These are called mampos. These are from a village in Chiapas called Ocosocuautla, which originally was a Zoque village. The indigenous people who live here are Zoque, and they have a huge celebration at Carnival with thousands of different performers. These masks are, and the costumes, which you'll see on the video, are very, very elaborate. And there's probably 100 different dance groups or performance groups that all get a chance to participate in the celebration. They're called, these masks are called, I mentioned mampos. They're also called chores, which means vaquero or cowboy. When you see the costumes, you will ask yourself, they look nothing like cowboys, but that's what they call themselves, chores, right? And there's a group of dancers in the carnival celebration that wear masks that are androgynous. If you'll notice here, this is a very delicate, dainty mask. It's very feminine, and yet there's a mustache on this character. These are androgynous characters called huichas or mampos. Okay, and they're essentially poking fun of homosexuals, which only in politically correct Mexico they would be allowed to do that. The masks are different. Whoops, the masks are very different, one to the other, but they all have a common characteristic. This is a very typical mampo, all right? Very traditional, and sometimes they're quite humorous, right? They're tiny, they're delicate, and they're worn during the carnival celebration in Ocoso, Cuautla, Chiapas. So let's look at the video, and you'll come back to me, and we'll keep on walking through the museum. By the way, I hope you noticed at the end of that video, there was a little young boy with a lasso or a piece of rope, and he tossed it at this gigantic character. That is David and Goliath. Part of the ceremony is that they try to tell the story in ceremony of the story of David and Goliath, and that's what that little clip was what you saw. Okay, let's keep walking. Come with me. This next grouping of masks are called Manueles. These masks are from a village called Tixtla, Tixtla, in the state of Guerrero. And the story of this dance is quite interesting. It's quite humorous. At the end of the 17th century, the region of Guerrero was controlled by a governor named Manuel, Don Manuel, and he lived in Tixtla, which is the capital of this region. And he was an arrogant Spaniard, pretentious. He had a large wife, and they abused the citizens. The indigenous people were constantly abused by Don Manuel, and the villagers back then decided that they would make fun of Don Manuel in a ceremony at his birthday. So on his birthday, which is in the month of August, they would put on a celebration. They would bring him gifts, and they performed a ceremony ridiculing Don Manuel and his wife. He used to, the story goes, he used to ride a stallion dressed in a top coat and tails, carrying a bag of silver, and when the crowds gathered around him, he would throw a piece of silver on the ground so that the citizenry would scramble for it, and he found that to be quite entertaining. So they developed the indigenous citizens developed a dance called the Dance of the Manueles, making fun of Don Manuel and his wife. And there are 12 other characters in the dance, Don Manuel and his wife, and 12 other characters, which are members of his family, extended family. And they're fundamentally ridiculing Don Manuel, but of course he thought that he was being revered. He thought that the villagers were paying homage to he and his wife. And so this dance has been going on now for centuries, and it's quite entertaining. It's the Dance of the Manueles. And the masks, this is Don Manuel here. This is the mask of Don Manuel. All right. And the other masks are other characters and members. This is his wife. This is his wife. So let's look at the dance. Let's look at the ceremony, and I'll come back and we'll continue our walk through the museum. Before we continue, I want to mention that the clips you're seeing of these ceremonies are just that. They're edits. Many of these ceremonies and dances go on for hours, and often they're repetitive. What I've done for museum visitors is edit in 2 or 3 minutes clips of the ceremony, so you get an idea of what the dances look like. But many of the ceremonies go on forever, and I wouldn't dare show you a complete ceremony because you never watched the webinar again. I just also want to mention that this is a museum catalog that I published, or was published, that I authored about 4 years ago. So all the masks you see in the museum are in the book. If you're interested, you can contact me, and I'll have a book sent to you. And so let's continue. Let's mosey through the museum. Okay, we're now in Zitlala, Guerrero, not too far from Tixla, where you saw the Dance of the Manueles. These masks are called tigres. There are no tigers in Mexico, but for some reason, I guess the influence of television over the years, the decades, the villagers call these tigres. These masks are made out of leather. They are 3 layers of leather. This is a very heavy mask. This is the bristle from a wild boar bristle, pig bristle, okay? And these masks are worn as protective helmets. And what happens during the ceremony, it's a fight between 2 individuals they have a knotted rope, a lariat, a rope with a big knot at the end, and they're whacking each other. So these are actually protective helmets. The dancer the performer is looking through the mouth. This is where they see through the mask, right? This ceremony is interesting in that it goes back to the pre-Columbian practice of blood sacrifice, sacrificing the most precious thing you have is your blood during the planting season, petitioning the rain god for a good harvest. And so over the centuries, this ceremony has transitioned into basically two guys whacking each other with a knotted rope, trying to draw blood. But the derivation of the ceremony goes back to the pre-Columbian practice of blood sacrifice, or drawing blood to petition the rain god Tlaloc for a good harvest. And it's pretty brutal. In fact, in many cases, they put these dancers, these performers, they're not dancing, as you'll see in a second. They put them in a caged area so that the crowd can't participate. And they just go at each other until somebody yields, somebody gives up after being beaten with a knotted rope. And this is the ceremony in Zitlala Guerrero. Let's look at the video.
Aviéntate rápido adelante, aviéntate rápido adelante. Así para así que falta.
So you can see that ritualized violence is the root of the dance you just saw, or the performance you just saw. Incidentally, I should say that collectors like myself and the industry, if you will, of masking in many parts of the world, we refer to these as dance masks, but you already know by looking at these videos that very often it's not dancing at all. It can be a fight, it can be a parade like the carnival celebration in Chiapas, but for some reason we call these dance masks. They actually should be called performance masks, but it's too late to change the, right? Let's keep walking. We're now going to focus on one of the most popular dances in Mexico, the dance of the viejos, or the dance of the little old men. These masks are from the state of Michoacan. There are many, many different celebrations, as you can see. This is a whole section of masks from Michoacan, but the most popular dance or performance is the dance of the viejos, the dance of the little old men. And this performance actually predates the arrival of the Spaniards, where people were dedicating themselves to the god of wisdom, the god of fire. And over the centuries, this ceremony has been transformed or reinterpreted as the dance of the old men. And it actually is a dedication. It's a very religious ceremony, although on the surface it's strictly entertaining. The performers actually dance inside the church in front of the altar, as a dedication to the Christ child at Christmas time, and then they go outside and perform for the general public. But the Catholic practice of that is called tithing, where families had to pay 10% of their income to the church. Income could be in the form of farm produce or animals, not necessarily money. But the practice was every month you would have to give 10%, the diezmo, 10% of your family's earnings to the Catholic Church, and that would be distributed to poor people in areas of Mexico. The people in Michoacan, the Purépecha, that's the name of the indigenous group in this region of Mexico, Purépecha, they didn't have the means to pay the tithe at Christmas time. And they would, instead of paying a tithe, they would perform for the Christ child inside the church. So this ceremony is very entertaining, very humorous, probably one of the most popular dances in Mexico. Let's take a look at it now. So that's the dance of the viejos. Those performers, by the way, are really young men, in some cases young boys, acting like old men, right? It's very entertaining. As I mentioned, this is one of the most popular performances in Mexico, and it's concentrated, that version is concentrated in Michoacan, in the state of Michoacan. Let me show you another ceremony that's very interesting and has quite an interesting history behind it. And this is the Battle of Cinco de Mayo, the dance, the performance of Cinco de Mayo. For all you history buffs out there, you may remember that in 1862, French forces trying to come into Mexico City to reclaim their debt from the Mexican government were intercepted by Mexican forces in the mountains of Puebla on May 5th, 1862, and the Mexican forces were successful in defeating the French forces. It wasn't until a year later that the French finally came into Mexico City and established and installed Maximilian and Carlotta as the new emperor and empress of Mexico. But there was a regiment of Algerian soldiers in that battle, and this mask. By the way, this mask is made out of leather, and this is wool. The beard is made out of wool. This mask represents a zouavo. They're called a zouavo. That was a French Algerian soldier, and they reenact this ceremony today, celebrating the heroism of Mexico and Mexican forces defeating the French. But what's interesting about this history, and I won't spend too much time explaining it, but the Mexican government had been deep in debt with Spain, France, the United States, and England, and it was the French who were unwilling to accept debt relief or grant debt relief to the Mexican government, and they came in militarily to reclaim their debt. And frankly, if it weren't for the fact that the United States was embroiled in a civil war in 1862, the United States quite likely would have marched into Mexico and reclaimed their debt. And there's a group of historians who firmly believe that if it weren't for the Civil War, I'd be talking to you from the United States right now. Okay, let's look at this. This is a battle between the Mexican forces and the French forces, reenacted in the villages in the mountains of Puebla where the battle actually happened. And they reenact this today, they reenact the ceremony in the city of Puebla, but the battle actually happened in two little villages in the mountains. The villages are called Zacapuatzla and Huehuetenango. But let's look at this ceremony, it's quite interesting and noisy. What's interesting about this, by the way, that's probably the noisiest celebration of all the mass performances I've ever seen. Those are muskets that they're using, obviously blank bullets, but it's probably the noisiest celebration I've ever heard. I couldn't hear myself talk after I saw this performance myself. Let's take a walk. I want to show you another interesting celebration. This is in Chiapas, in Chiapa de Corzo, Chiapas. These masks represent Spaniards, and this is called the dance of the Patachicos, for the children. These masks are carved, the carved wood, highly crafted, as you can see, much more so than many of the other masks. These masks are made by santeros, not by mascoreros, mask makers. They're made by santeros, and santeros make the statues for the churches. And you can imagine a mask like this with a full body without this montera, as it's called, and you could easily imagine that this would be a saint displayed in a Catholic church. Their eyes are made out of glass, and they're a very penetrating look to these masks. But the dance itself, the performance itself, it's done on the feast day of San Sebastian, which is January 20th, and all during that week in January, thousands of villagers come out and perform as Patachicos. And the story of this dance is interesting. The story, as I've been told and has been recorded, is there was a very wealthy woman, and there was a conflict of whether she was from Mexico City or somewhere in Guatemala, but a very wealthy woman who had a young son who was very, very ill. And modern medicine back then, we're talking 250 years ago, was unable to cure her son. And Chiapa de Corzo, this village, was famous for its shamans, or curanderos, healers. And so she brought her son to this village, Chiapa de Corzo, to be treated by the shamans. And partially successful, her son got better. And during his illness, the villagers, because she was a very wealthy woman, she had built a hospital, she had built a school for the town, for the village. And as a way to say thank you, the villagers would made masks that represented Spaniards, or Caucasians, if you will, non-indigenous, and they performed in front of the window of the room where this boy was recovering from his illness. And so it's the para chicos is para los chicos, for the children. And today, this performance is still done in Chiapa de Corzo. And again, it involves, you'll see from the video, thousands of villagers who perform. The clip you're going to see right now is actually a documentary I found and edited for the museum. So take a look at the dance of the para chicos. That's the dance of the para chicos. Follow me. We're going to look at another interesting performance. In many villages in the state of Hidalgo and Veracruz is a dance performance known as the dance of the Juan Negros. Now, Juan Negro is Juan, El Negro, the black, and Pañol, which is an abbreviation of Español, right? And Pañol is this white gentleman here, this Caucasian gentleman here, and Juan, the Juan Negro, is represented by this mask. And it's basically what it is. It's a fight, a mock battle between Juan, El Negro, and El Pañol, the Spaniard, right? The Spaniard represents the head of the plantation, the owner of a plantation, and Juan Negro represents the head slave on the plantation, right? And what they're doing is having what looks like a courtship dance, but they're actually competing for the hand of a native woman. And she's portrayed in the clip you're going to see in a minute. And I call this an immorality play. And the reason this performance exists today is because when blacks were brought into Mexico by the Spaniards as slaves, the native women found these black slaves to be very interesting. And as a consequence, the Spaniards, who wanted the women for themselves, developed this performance to teach the natives and the blacks that it was okay for a Spaniard to cohabitate with a native woman and not okay for a black to do that. And in that sense, it's an immorality play. And that goes back to the feudal practice in feudal times of the lord having the right of it's called the droit de I can't remember what it's called. In French, it's the right of the lord to deflower a woman who is lived in his estate, and in that sense, it's a very crude and almost immoral practice. But the Dance of the Juan Negros today is this depiction of two characters dancing quite humorously, but they're trying to attract the native woman. And so let's take a look at that performance. Just remembered it's called the right of the droit de seigneur in French, and the droit de pernada in Spanish. That's the right of the lord to deflower a woman on his estate. The masks are always made by a mask maker in pairs. So these masks are carved by the same mask maker, right? And they always do the two different important characters. And sometimes, as you've seen a minute up here, you can see that this is the mask of the woman who they're competing for. In many cases, the woman, the character portrayed as you just saw in the ceremony, is unmasked, but in some cases she's masked. So let's keep walking. I'll show you another interesting ceremony. We're now in Oaxaca, in a village called Huazalotitlan, Oaxaca. The people who live here are Mixteco. They speak the Mixteco language, and their heritage, their cultural heritage, goes back to the indigenous group of Mixteco. Okay, these masks are diablos, and they're performed by people who have African heritage. They refer to themselves as Tenangos. They're very proud of their African heritage. Their ancestors, of course, were former slaves. And they perform the dance of the Diablos on Day of the Dead. And these masks, this mask is made of cardboard, and this is horsehair. This mask is carved wood as well as these two as well. This is horsehair. It's very dramatic. Okay. What's interesting is that this performance, done by people who have African heritage, they call themselves Afro-Mestizos or Tenangos, as I mentioned. What's interesting about this performance, which you're about to see, is that they dedicate the ceremony to an African god, a Yoruban god, begging the god prior to the performance, begging the god to free them from slavery. And this heritage is still being carried over in performances today. The dance of the Diablos. Let's take a look at that. You might be interested to know that there is a huge black population in Mexico whose ancestors were former slaves. The Mexican government last year published data from research that was done 2 years ago, and they've discovered that there's 1,400,000 Mexican citizens of African descent living in Mexico today who have a very strong sense of cultural attachment to their native African roots. And what you saw just now are a group of dancers who all, if you took their masks off and looked at them, you would think you were in Haiti or Jamaica. These are Mexican blacks. Of course, they have aquiline features simply because their blood is mixed up with European blood, but they have a very strong affinity, a very strong tie to their African heritage. And these dancers, by the way, live in the mountains of the Sierra Madre Mountains in an area of Mexico called the Costa Chica, which is a regional description. It's like saying New England, and it encompasses parts of Oaxaca and Guerrero in the Sierra Madre Mountains.
Phil, that was fantastic. I think this is a really great way to see the museum and to go through it. That was really, really enlightening and illuminating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool to go to an actual, well, once we have ceremonies again, to join you on a tour. You should take people as a guide to some of these. Is that something that you thought about?
Yeah, I would. I tend to, some of these villages are very small, and the people are not used to seeing outsiders. So there's quite a few places I could take guests, and many I wouldn't, because they're not used to seeing groups of tourists. But the good news is everybody's masked during COVID. So yeah.
So were you able to see in the chat, there was a couple of questions in there?
Yeah, read them to me, or let me respond to them.
Okay, so the one question was that in the dance of the Los Manueles, the dancers carried sticks that look like snakes. Is there any message or symbolism there?
Yeah, yes, that's a very astute observation. That's exactly what they're supposed to represent, and it's just another form of derision or ridicule, because the dancers are reenacting the Don Manuel and his overweight wife, and they're all being derided, and so the costumes are over the top. You'll notice in his wife's derriere, there's stuffed balloons in there, and those canes they're using are crooked and they do represent snakes. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Shay, who posed that question, also asks about the in the dance of the Parachicos, why the furry hats or the headdresses on the dancers, and what are they made of?
The crown that's worn by all the dancers, as what I've been told, is humorous. They were trying to cheer up the young boy who was sick, Doña Argula's young boy, who was being treated back then for his ailments, and the villagers wore these masks representing Spaniards. And put this funny crown on them to really for entertainment, and they're made out of hemp, jute, ixtle. It's the same material that rope is made from, jute.
So Marilee Bayreuther says that she likes the curved wooden masks with interwoven snakes and unpainted. She asks, are these masks used in dances, or are they for tourists?
Is that a mask that she saw in the museum, or I guess not? I guess we're not able to know that.
Well, Marilee, if you can follow up with that, clarify the question, and Bill can give you.
If she's still watching, in Michoacan, where they carve, there are quite a few very excellent carvers around the Lake Pátzcuaro area, who make very elaborate masks with snakes running around them. They are sold in the public market. They're not, they're not used in ceremony. The ones that are painted, particularly the ones that come from Tokwaro, Michoacan, have the same form as the masks that are unpainted, but they're elaborately painted and they are used in ceremony. So I'd have to see the mask she's referring to be sure of the accuracy of my response. But unpainted, there are masks used in ceremony that are unpainted, but generally they're decorated.
She said that she did not see the mask that she's referring to today. So I guess this is
okay.
Elsewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cynthia Klaus asks, have all of your masks been worn for performances, or do local craft people make masks for sale?
Yes and yes. I would not have a mask in the museum. Wait a minute, I'm going down a rabbit hole with a double negative. All the masks in the museum have been worn in ceremony. Serious collectors don't consider masks that have not been performed to be authentic. I think I mentioned that in my first webinar that's posted on your website. But yeah, all the masks in the museum have been used in ceremony. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them in the museum. And what was the other part of that question?
Oops, I closed it out. Do local people make masks for sale? Mask makers
very often make masks for the commercial market, and I don't begrudge them that. Of course, they have to put food on the table and you know, so, but there are a few mask makers that make masks for the performances in their village, and they're sold or rented to the villagers for use in ceremony, and then they'll make masks for the commercial market. And that's, for me, that's fine. I just wouldn't have one of those in the museum. I actually have in the past bought a mask from a mask maker that's right off the shelf, given it to somebody in his family to perform that day or the next day, so that I could say, it's been used in ceremony. But I've only done that once or twice.
It's all about the bragging rights.
It's kind of like being baptized, you know. If a mask hasn't been worn in a ceremony, it's not, you know, it doesn't have its juju. So, yeah.
On the topic of the commercial market, Cher says, Bill, Gary and I have collected a few masks. One of our favorite is a metal or tin one, and it's painted like the face of a tiger. It looks a bit like the ones in the Dance of Los Tigres. And do you think that might be true? She'd like to show it to you when she's back in town.
Yes, please show it to me. I couldn't opine on that unless I saw the mask, but I can tell you this, that a very, very tiny percentage of ceremonial masks are made out of metal. Most of them are carved wood, leather, made out of plant materials often. But I have one metal mask in the museum. Of the 600 masks I have, one is made out of metal. So I'd have to see the mask to know if it were, you know, potentially used in ceremony.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about the, which one was the dance where they beat each other? The Danza de los Tigres.
Yeah.
Who gets chosen to be the beaters? Like, how do
it's become, it's a macho thing. It's become macho. It's a guy may have a grudge against somebody else for whatever reason, and they'll line up their, you know, they'll make a decision to publicly take out their anger on each other, and they are trying to hurt each other clearly. The dance, of course, that performance goes back to the bloodletting ceremony, going back, you know, before the arrival of the Spaniards 500 years ago. But I think anybody in the village who wants to take a whack at somebody else can do that. They get themselves a mask and a knotted rope and have at it. I don't think there's there's no group of judges deciding who gets to do it. Yeah.
On the topic of people who are chosen for the dances, who are the people who perform the dances? Is it like part of a church group? Are they a dance group? Is it a family?
Yeah.
How does that?
It depends on the ceremony. There are groups of dancers that come from cofridas. It's like the equivalent of the altar society, and those performers very often in the dances that are more religious, in religious reenactments, those cofrades make decisions on who gets to be Saint James, Santiago. It's a very important role, and it's an honorary role. The person who is allowed to be Saint James has been an exemplary citizen in their community, given oodles of money to the Catholic Church, and therefore they get to perform these roles. Usually more religious. There are other ceremonies like carnival celebrations. If you get yourself a mask and get yourself an outfit, you can be part of the ceremony. So it really does depend. And of course, some of the reenactments, the biblical reenactments, there's a limited number of characters. In the Easter celebration, there's one Jesus, there's one Pontius Pilate, right? There's 12 apostles, right? There are lots of Pharisees, Fariseos, the sect of Jews that didn't agree with Christ's teaching. So there's lots of those guys, but it's a limited number based on the role or the roles being played in a performance.
Like the dance with the old men dance, you mentioned that it was often young boys, and they clearly had practiced. It's a choreographed thing, so they are a group that gets together throughout the year prior to this.
Yeah, there are, in most of the villages, there's what they call a centro cultural, a cultural center, which is really somebody's home. Often it's a mask maker, and they're very involved in teaching the villagers the ceremonies and the dance steps. And they're rehearsed, and some of them are very elaborate, like the dance of the viejos. That takes quite a bit of skill to learn to do that. And other ceremonies are just a fight between groups of people. You know, there's no dance steps at all. As I said earlier, they should be called performance masks, not dance masks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a follow-up question about the tiger dance. How did they come to tigers? You know, you mentioned that tigers in Mexico, but it looked cute.
there are no tigres in Mexico. They're called jaguares, jaguars, right? In the country of Mexico, the large cats that exist in Mexico are what we call mountain lions or pumas. In the southern part of Mexico are jaguares, jaguars, that are often spotted and sometimes pure black out of a litter. And there are smaller cats, of course. But because of the influence of television, I guess, or Hollywood going back years and years and years, some of these villages call them the dance of the tigres. Again, there are no tigres in Mexico. In zoos, maybe.
Sure. Let's see. I don't see any other questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question. Bill has quite the selection of videos of all these dances. Bill, how do people access those videos?
How could people see the videos? There are a lot. You go to YouTube and type in Mexican. You go to YouTube and you can type in Mexican ceremonial dances, and some of these have been posted on YouTube. But if you wanted to see the dances that you've just seen and many more, and this is where I get to plug my book. Can you see this?
Beautiful.
This is a book that was published about, I guess, 7 years ago now. In the second edition of the book, we added a feature in the book called Augmented Reality, where if you download an app on your iPhone called RX2, Reality X2, and once you've downloaded that app, you can point your iPhone to 15 different pages in this book, and the dance will come up on your iPhone or your pad or your tablet, right? But you have to download the app. It's a free download. And the instructions on how to do it are at the very beginning of the book. So if anybody has my book, they have the dances as well, simply by pointing their phone at the page. There's an icon on 15 different pages, and the app reads that icon and downloads the dance from the cloud.
That's really cool.
It's the same technology they're using in airports for facial identification, by the way.
Great.
Called augmented reality. Yeah.
So where can people get your book? Is it available on Amazon?
It used to be, but it didn't get much traction, so I pulled it off Amazon. You get it through me here. If people write me or email me, whatever, I can have a book sent to them. And again, the instructions on getting the videos is right in the book. Yeah.
Paula Iblum.
Thanks for asking.
Sure. Paula says that it's a great book and it has beautiful color representation. So well done on the book.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you.
And as she actually says that she has the first edition of the book, can she access the app?
Paula, send me an email and I will send you the instructions on how to download the app. You can point your phone to those 15. I'll tell you what the 15 pages are, and you can get the videos. But just send me an email, and I'll send you the instructions.
And Bill's email is in the chat window here. And Cher wants to know, how much does the book cost?
$85 US, plus shipping, which is, I use Media Mail, which is a US Postal Service. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. It's the US Postal Service offers a special discount for educational material within the United States. So you can get the book through Media Mail. I think it's an extra $13, but the book cost is $85. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any more questions. Is there anything that you want to add while we wait for more questions?
Not really, but if anybody ruminates on this presentation and wants to ask me any questions, please feel free to send me an email, or and I'll be happy to follow up with you if there's any more information that anyone would like. Yeah. Great. Yep.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
There were some questions on where you can go to donate. So our website, Language Adventure Pros, click on webinars, and when you'll see Bill's flyer at the top, and there's a button for donations, and those donations, as we said, will go to the Latin American Relief Fund. What else did I wanted to just say about, this recorded webinar will be available on our website after tomorrow once we get it up, and all of our past webinars are also on our website. Our upcoming webinars, we're super excited. We've moved away from the academic presentations that we've had to things that I think are more on the fun side. We have a virtual cooking class, again, but it's an interesting one because if you're in San Miguel, you can order a packet of the ingredients to be delivered to your house, or the finished product. And the product that, or the recipe that they'll be cooking on September 5th and September 12th. It's 2 different sessions. It's not a part 1, part 2, but we have chile and nogada, which is a very traditional, very beloved dish in Mexico, especially around this time during pomegranate season, which runs in August, September, from the end of July to the beginning of October. And it comes in the colors of the Mexican flag, which has been used as the meal for the very traditional Mexican Independence Day. So we'll be cooking chiles en nogada on September 5th and September 12th with Chef Andres Jordan, who previously worked at a Michelin-starred restaurant in the Bay Area. And the following week, September 19th, we have Vale Smerlinger Suarez joining us from the Taste of San Miguel. She's an award-winning storyteller, and she's going to be talking about ghost stories of San Miguel, the spirits of San Miguel. So that was actually meant to be a tour that was the spirits. So you go to a bar, you can have a drink, and then she tells you ghost stories. Maybe she'll give us a drinking list to go along with the spirit stories that she'll be telling us. But to sign up for those webinars, to donate for this one, and to view past webinars, our website is languageadventurepros.com/webinars. And I think that's everything that we have. I hope to see you at one of those. I should mention that the cooking classes and the chilies, the prepared and the ingredients, there's a limited number. So if you're interested, I encourage you to register ahead of time. Again, that's Saturday, September 5th, or is it September? It's September 5th and 12th. I can't remember if it's a Saturday or Sunday. I believe it's Saturday. September 5th, September 12th from 6 to 7:30. And then the Spirits of San Miguel Storytelling Hour is on September 19th. If there's anything else, let's see. We also have, since we're talking about the Latin American Relief Fund, we have 2 webinars scheduled as well on the same platform. the fourth Thursday of September and the fourth Thursday of October. We have Pastor Ignacio Ramirez, who is the director of the Albergue Abba Migrant Shelter in Celaya, who will be joining us and talking about the work that he does. We also have Cesar Arias, who is, I think I'm going to screw this up, but he has something to do with the Charco. He's a big person and big name at the Charco, and he'll be talking with us about the environmental situation in San Miguel right now. So we have some really interesting things coming up, and we hope that you can join us. And thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. Thank you so much. That was a really neat way to do it.
Thank you all for participating, and thank you, Ginger, and thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Ginger, yeah, thank you, Ginger, for all the work of editing the videos. You guys both did a great job. Thank you both. Thank you all. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Let's see. I think, Bill, you might have to end it because you are the host. Do you see?
Mm-hmm.
Ginger?
Hi.